To understand this story, we need to understand the context of superhero comics at the dawn of the new millennium. Moral compasses of society change over time. What is considered okay or appropriate or even good or bad has changed. Popular opinions about what is right and just and decent will evolve. In turn, our media reflects those changes, and thus paragons of what is good must, in turn, reevaluate their ethics and determine whether they need to change. Superheroes, thus, have evolved over time to reflect the ethos of the people making them, what pop culture says is good and right during their present. You can see it especially as the Bronze Age of comics emerged. Suddenly, superheroes faced problems that can't be punched or put in jail. From the Bronze Age into the Dark Age, you have reevaluations of what it means to be a superhero, how to actually help the world. You can create a direct line from Squadron Supreme's 1985 maxi series, wherein the titular heroes try to turn the Earth into a utopia, directly to a 1999 book called The Authority. In between, you have the time of heroes getting darker and more violent to respond to a darker and more violent world, as conceived by writers who were no longer restrained by an idealism of ages past. Heroes could use guns, could kill, could grit their teeth and never smile, in many cases indistinct from the villains they were fighting. And sure, many lamented it even at the time, but the changes were always going to occur eventually. To quote Mr. Spock, change is the essential process of all existence. Superheroes and their ethics were always going to change, because they had to if they wanted to stay relevant and interesting. And that brings us back to The Authority. The Authority was a Wildstorm book originally written by Warren Ellis that spun out of Stormwatch, that book I reviewed the 0th issue of a few years ago, as well as its later integration into the DC Universe post-New 52, a secret United Nations force of superheroes designed to keep watch over the Earth. They were disbanded just prior to the Authority for a few reasons that aren't really relevant, although that does include the fact that they fought the xenomorphs from Alien, some of them died, and that story is considered canon. The premise was that several former members of Stormwatch and other heroes banded together in a powerful alien spacecraft to basically say, screw it, we don't need the backing of the United Nations, we're gonna protect the Earth no matter what it takes without answering to any other authority. In the first 12 issues, Warren Ellis's run, the book was pretty good. There was still a bit of edgelordness at times, but the characters had very real moments of humanity. Some of the things they did to stop threats were a bit morally questionable, but ultimately they were always trying to save lives and dealt with very science fiction-y kind of threats. Its downside really was that each storyline was only 4 issues long, and thus there were a lot of ideas that could have expanded the story more, but ended up just being footnotes in them as a result. But that's not terrible. Really, when I was reading this stuff in anticipation of this review, the thought that occurred to me was, wow, this is clearly what Mark Millar wanted to do with the Ultimates, but sucked at. So anyway, Mark Millar took over the book after Warren Ellis left. Reading those first 12 issues, I was a bit confused about why What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way was a direct response to it. And then I read some of Mark Millar's run, and it all clicked into place. This is what it's an answer to. Suddenly, the team of very professional, imaginative, and interesting characters who didn't want to kill, but believed that sometimes it's necessary to stop a threat, became a bunch of smug jackasses who constantly swear, talk crudely, and happily discuss how they're gonna murder their opponents, and then openly do so by flying at super speed through someone's head or the like. They slaughter, admittedly, totalitarian governments with no plan in place to rebuild nations other than take on refugees in their massive spaceship. They fight a thinly veiled pastiche of Marvel heroes who are only worse than them because they're also extremely bigoted and happy to murder innocent people in the process. Hell, their boss seems to be like a disgusting parody of Jack Kirby for no reason other than, "Lol, look at how edgy I am!" Which, come to think of it, is pretty much Mark Millar's entire wheelhouse, so I don't know why I'm surprised. Who'd have thought Trouble was actually one of his less awful works? Inexplicably, this stuff was popular. It wasn't topping sales charts, but the readership was growing over time, which is an uncommon thing these days outside of temporary sales gimmicks like crossovers and variant covers. The sales orders between the Authority and Action Comics were comparable to each other. Not great, but consistent, and indeed growing at times, with the Authority even overtaking the premier book of Superman. And thus, with that popularity and people showing support and love for a group that basically said, we'll do what we want with our power, just be grateful we're somewhat nice and think racism and homophobia are bad. Except when we do it. The question reared its ugly head. Are traditional superheroics pointless? Naive? Should Superman and heroes like him be willing to kill people with their power to match the supposedly far more successful and effectively brutal tactics of groups like the Authority? And please, no pedantics about, well, Superman did kill this one time in this canon story, or anything like that. Aside from circumstances being contrived to do such a thing, it doesn't mean the story is good, or if they even still considered it canon by that point. And more importantly, you know what we're really talking about. Should Superman just put his fist through Lex Luthor's face to end him? That sort of thing. Because that's what the Authority did. That is what is at the heart of this story, a complete and fundamental shift in the morality of mainstream superheroes. And don't think it hasn't happened before. Even Captain America, the dude who punched Hitler, at one point in time thought killing was always wrong, absolutely. The moralities of our heroes can shift with a change in popular opinion. So, why not Superman? In 2001, writer Joe Kelly had an answer, the comic we're going to review today. Most of you are probably more familiar with the story thanks to its animated adaptation, Superman vs. the Elite, and it is a very faithful adaptation, owing mostly to Joe Kelly being the writer of said adaptation as well. Little details were changed, a battle on Io became a battle on Earth's moon sort of thing, backstories and the like were expanded for the sake of movie length. It's definitely one of the better DC straight-to-video animated movies, but we're concerned with just the comic that spawned it. So let's dig into Action Comics number 775, What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way? Clark wants to know how he could portray such obvious murderers as heroes. Ryder says the military were about to do a lot more damage trying to fight the gorilla, and the Elite stopped it. Although I'm pretty sure he says it with a bit of racism in there too, because suddenly Jack Ryder is that much of a dick. The situation could have been contained without a single life lost. Superman could have... Superman? That would have been great. Enough monkey business, guys! I'm taking you and your terrorist chums downtown for a spanking. And 3 months later, it would happen all over again. You'll notice, however, that response did not actually address the point, that less lives would have been lost. He just complained because he saw Superman as corny or naive. Image is more important. Reality is a mite bloodier than sitcoms or comics. The grays stretch out farther. Okay, this one might be a direct reference to The Authority, wherein the Hulk parody directly said comic books are... well, there you are. And if you want to disregard what they say because, hey, it's a villain saying it, well, the leader of the Authority also tells the president, we're not like comic book heroes. It astounds me when I see writers in comics insulting comic books. It always comes off as so try-hard and immature. I'm not like those comics! Take me seriously! I'm an adult! Anyway, Superman says that he recognizes the darker elements of the world, but that they can't throw morality in the garbage because of difficult times. Black counters that he's privileged and hasn't encountered real difficult times. That survival sometimes means doing morally questionable things. They're human beings with the power to make a difference, and they're doing it their way. And they love us for it. I like that is especially brought up because I think it really highlights another critique of the Authority, wherein they really embrace their celebrity status and use it for drugs, sex, and money. They can say it's about the greater good as much as they like, but it often comes across like they do care more about how they look than doing the right thing. This isn't about love. It's about removing the cancers that fester in us and flushing them down the toilet. The people don't want babysitters in spandex to slap them on the wrist when they're bad. They want surgeons to cut the ugly bits from them and charge them through the moral nose. Dr. Manchester Black at your service. Okay, now we're getting into the real nitty-gritty of this whole thing. For additional points that I'm going to try not to repeat, check out SF Debris' review of Superman vs. the Elite. A lot of good stuff there that can be echoed here. As I brought up in the Superman 4 review, Superman is not a god. He's just a guy trying to do good wherever he can. Unilaterally declaring yourself to answer to no one, to make choices that will affect billions of people without even asking anybody first, does not make you someone in service of humanity, but rather placing yourself above them. And while Black is saying that people don't want babysitters in spandex, he made it clear with his first sentence that he does not care what people want. He who has the power makes the rules, he said. Might makes right. But to paraphrase my favorite movie, if superheroes are modern-day knight errants, then the code they should be following is might for right. Those who have power should use it only for that which is moral. No one hits one of my people and walks was the next thing he said. Basically, we are in charge. Defy us and you will die. What the elite and the authority promise is not a better world. It's just a world living in constant fear. Ordinary people have to be afraid of escalation. They have to be afraid of these super powerful beings suddenly deciding, you know what, you guys never vote for your own self-interest, so you don't get to vote anymore. They have to be afraid of being collateral damage because beings like them don't actually care about them. They claim to, but the truth is they just like flexing their might. They're hammers, and every problem looks like a nail. People have to be afraid that one day their masters will grow bored of them and wipe them out. After all, they already don't care about anything. Not lives, not treaties, not governments, not morality. So why would they care about the people they're supposed to protect? And let it not be said that I'm not fair. Even Mark Millar's book asked, hey, shouldn't we be concerned about that guy with godlike powers also being a heroin addict? I'm kinda iffy about him being a part of the good guys if this keeps up. Reality is pain, bile, and darkness. Reality rules. More on this in a bit. Whacks Black around for good measure as he starts to cry, both terrified and outraged by this. His one recourse is to talk to the cameras that have been observing this and transmitting it to Earth, proclaiming that Superman is no better than they were. Yes, they did see, didn't they? They saw all the ugliness, the anger, and I bet it frightened them. It frightened me when I decided to cross the line. Do what you do. I was terrified. Thought it would be tough, but you know what? Anger is easy. Hate is easy. Vengeance and spite are easy. As was indicated by Jack Ryder's words at the beginning of the comic, there is a misconception that Superman is a big meathead who just delivers corny lines because that's the stereotype of superheroes. But superheroes have evolved. Their writing has gotten smarter. And consequently, Superman is not stupid. One of the greatest things about Superman is that he possesses all this power, all these abilities that any cynical person would say would corrupt and make him into a terrifying tyrant, but it didn't. He chose to use his powers for kindness, to be a good person, the kind of person who wouldn't murder everyone when he got angry, to always hold his power in check in a world full of cardboard to make sure that he never hurt innocent people. He got smarter because he needed to be smarter to ensure that he wouldn't take a life. It's not like he's never thought about doing these things. It's just he chose not to. He thought about it, he considered it, and he decided it was wrong. The elite have all that power and none of the wisdom. They're sloppy, they're arrogant, and they're cynical. A little imagination and they could use the magnificently broad powers they have to accomplish the same things they claimed to be about without a single life lost. But no, they think the world is ugly and mean, and so they got ugly and mean in response. It's easy to look at the terrible things happening at any given point in history and see all the examples of greed, corruption, and evil, but it's also easy to overlook the compassion, the decency, to see people being nice and good and wonderful. That's my deconstruction of superheroes. People can be and are kind. So why wouldn't someone with incredible abilities be kind too?